What's up? This is your host Christopher Michael Cooper, certified graphic design specialist and social media brand ambassador by trade. We are sponsored by Razor Stores here on Grayling Imprint TV. So I'm gonna get into this video today. Any subscriptions and likes would be a plus. This video I'm making today, I choose to make it about wireframing. And wireframing is basically a technical architectural blueprint for websites or applications that you create as a graphic designer. So I want to jump into this video and explain more about what wireframing is. But let me tell you to start, it's really a lot better as a graphic designer or web designer if you do your mock-ups for wireframing through Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop. Now if you don't have Adobe Photoshop, there's other ways you could do it. Check out sites like mockup.com. But I'm providing you all with value, providing Michigan graphic designers with value and people all over the world with value. I'm going to explain a lot more starting now about what wireframing is and how to do wireframing. So, is wireframe technical and does it require coding, one may ask. Let's jump into this topic. So, the answer to this question is a wireframe, which is also known as a schematic or even a screen blueprint, is a skeletal visual guide of a website framework. Like I said, when you're doing a mock-up, it's basically an architectural blueprint of a website or application. So, wireframing is a very important step in the design process and allows you to define the information hierarchy of your design, making it much easier to plan a layout according to your user and what your user wants, and to the process of processing the information. So this is exactly what wireframing is, and like I said, it's a very, very important step to do a wireframe mock-up for a website or application as a web designer or graphic designer. So, wireframing is basically an architectural blueprint. Anyways, you can't start building layers in Photoshop or writing blocks of code if you do not know where the information is going to go. Also note, a wireframe is very useful to determine how user interactions or a user interacts with the interface. Wireframes can include various states of buttons or menu behaviors. Wireframing is important because it will let the designer plan out the layout and the interaction of an interface without the designer getting distracted by colors or color palettes or typefaces and copy. So these are two critical keys to remember with wireframing and why the colors will distract somebody or the type, because a wireframe basically is all black and white. It's a skeletal outline of it. So step number one, this is the wireframing process, and step number one in creating a mock-up for a wireframe process is this. Step number one, get inspiration. Google other wireframes so you can get a visual understanding of the graphic designer's handle and how other wireframes are designed in the process. So, also try Wirefy. It is a browser bookmark. If you will continually observe what other graphic designers are doing for their wireframes, you will begin to picture how the wireframe process works in your mind. Step number two in the wireframe process. Designing your process. Find the right process that you are most comfortable with. Different designers approach wireframing and its translations to visions or code in different ways. A well-known process by 37 Signals, I would check that out, Google 37 Signals, but they state to use sketches and go straight to code. Some people are not really good at sketching and prefer not to use a wireframing tool to create a wireframe mockup. Other graphic designers want to have as many steps as possible to minimize deviations, or so they can think through every single aspect as the design takes shape. Eventually you will develop your own wireframing mock-up process. Designing wireframing takes use of using Illustrator first for your wireframe. Then you create a visual mock-up in Photoshop. And the last thing you do is the code using CSS Grid. This is an example of a type of wireframe process. Step number 3, pick your tool. Some tools commonly used for wireframe mockups are as follows: Axer, OmniGraph, PowerPoint, Adobe CS, Fireworks, Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, or ProtoShare. Step number 4, set a grid. There are a lot of regards to grid systems. By simply putting a grid in it, your mockup is a structure and simple way to lay out elements. Adobe Illustrator is commonly used for creating a grid. And let me tell you, when I was in college learning the grid system is based off a lot of algebra, calculus, angles, and lines. There's a lot of math used in the grid system, so it's really important that you learn about angles and mathematics when you're designing a grid, and it will help you really get better at laying out the grid, and you're laying out things that are aligned with the grid. So, step number 5, determine layout using boxes. Draw boxes on the grid. Think about the order of information you want to present to the visitors. From top to bottom is easiest, and then from left to right. Step number 6, define information hierarchy with typography. When you are satisfied with how the boxes are laid out, drop pieces of your content to get a feel of whether the information is being well structured. Never be afraid to experiment when you're doing a wireframe mock-up. Step number 7, fine-tune with grayscale and turn your wireframe to a grayscale to determine the visual strength of your elements before you have to pick a color palette. It will help you with the visual design process later on. Like I said, if you use color right away and you don't use the grayscale process, it's going to distract you from how your design really is going to work out. So, step number 8, turn your wireframe into a visual in Photoshop and export it into a PSD file. Step number 9, last and not least, you translate your wireframe into code. So I hope this video provided you value. This is the typical process of doing a wireframe mock-up as a graphic designer or web designer. Please check out thislife-is-not-pretend-grading-design.com. Please check out my blog for more value. And until next time on Grading and Print TV, peace.